The older I get, the more evidence I gather that when I take the blame, it tends to go well for me. In the teams of leaders I've had the good fortune to develop over the years, I have a saying: it's always my fault until it's not. I'll go into detail on the until it's not part a little later. The hope is that they then take on the same mantle when they operate with their own teams and each other. My view of a team is that the leader is always responsible for what's happening in it. Somebody missed a deadline. Was the deadline communicated effectively? Somebody made an error in a presentation. Was the presentation reviewed for accuracy? Somebody isn't where they're supposed to be when they're supposed to be there. Was the relevance of both time and place impressed upon them? Here's the ultimate argument killer whenever there's a question as to whether somebody should accept accountability. What's the harm in assessing if you could have done something better? The worst case scenario for exploring your own part to play is you discover there isn't much else you can think of that you could have acted on to improve the situation. This is what high caliber professionals do across industries. They look at any given situation and assess how they could have done a better job. That's how they get to be such high performers. From Olympic athletes reviewing their run in their heads to figure out how they could have shaved off a few seconds or gained a few points so they can apply that learning on the next run, to a CEO of a corporation reviewing a deal in her head to identify if there were any details she can glean to make the next one smoother. Full accountability means accepting all of your part in a situation, maybe more, because there are angles you might not ever see. I knew for sure that I had a team of unstoppable superheroes when they all scrambled to take the blame for something that went wrong. They figured out that we can learn from our mistakes, so if it was never their fault, then there was nothing for them to learn or develop. They also learned that when everyone is willing to take the blame, it becomes a very safe environment to make mistakes. And since making mistakes is both inevitable and an integral part of learning, I consider this to be one of the most valuable components of a team culture or environment. I have way more to say about the value of mistakes, but here I'll focus on the value of admitting and owning them. Stay tuned to the end if you'd like to find out what genuine accountability is and the many ways that full ownership of one's actions can make you a better worker, leader, and person. As always, there is a principle that sums it up at the end. It's important to note here what accountability does not mean. Many think it's something you hold others to. This is entirely inaccurate. You can't hold somebody else accountable. You can only hold yourself accountable. Accountability is ultimate ownership, an outlook, a firm principle to build a foundation on. The first definition you'd see if you looked it up is expected or required to account for one's actions, answerable. Synonym responsible. Account for one's actions. Whether you're expected or required shouldn't matter. Everyone loves a person who holds themselves accountable for their actions, regardless of circumstances. A fairly common example to illustrate this happens in businesses across the globe. Somebody is forced to cover for somebody else, and if they're in an environment where this is encouraged, they set out to understand why they were put in that position. If the person who caused the gap, let's call him Dave, is voicing his assumption that, as far as he knew, everything was covered, then it becomes possible Dave is deflecting. Perhaps it wasn't Dave's fault. But what's the harm in Dave looking back upon the situation and exploring if there was anything he could have done better? Any communication he could have provided more effectively? Any questions he could have asked that might have prevented the situation? The person who had to cover Dave is likely to be completely assuaged that their coworker wants to improve, and that, if nothing else, builds trust. Deflection causes the opposite. We all like people who want to improve because it is an indicator that those people have embraced their humanity. We all know intrinsically that nobody is perfect, so when we come across people who act like they are, it flags on our radar that they're fake. Somebody who never accepts blame is, on some level, trying to convince you that they're perfect. We hate that. We hate it because we know in our bones that it's a lie. If a person deflects enough mistakes and always has someone else to point to, eventually they become a pariah, and a strong group will find a way to extricate them. Like our immune system attacks things that are unhealthy to us, a healthy team will quickly identify a liar, even one who lies to themselves, and act to remove them. The challenge is that a lot of us grew up with deflections as a survival tactic because there aren't enough authority figures who appreciate true accountability. Admit to your parents that you broke the vase, grounded. Admit to the teacher that you were the one who launched the spitball, detention. Admit to the police officer you knew you were speeding, ticket. Admit to your spouse that you just weren't thinking of them, hurt feelings. Admit to the judge your guilt of a crime, punishment. Possibly reduced sentence, but still punishment. We have a society that does not inherently reward accountability. We want to be viewed in the best possible light at all times to be accepted in our tribes, And if it wasn't our fault, even if it really was, then our reputation remains untarnished. Untarnished reputation equals good standing in the tribe. However, most of us have built-in radars for subterfuge. Many of us can detect when somebody is covering something up, and if the truth doesn't come out in conversation, the result is far worse than if they'd owned the issue. If you have children, this might be familiar to you. Ever told your kid that it's worse to lie to you about whatever they did? I have a theory that it's worse because in these instances, we're being put to work in order to calibrate our radar, a system that is in our DNA for survival purposes to keep us out of danger, though isn't needed in the same ways it was built for, like identifying a charging lion kind of danger. Our radar helps us make sense of the world and keep us safe, and being lied to challenges the efficacy of that system and causes us to desire calibration. Calibration requires work and can lead to stress in some cases if the work is impossible to perform or produces answers that still don't make sense. In other words, you get mad at your kid or employee or friend or family member for lying to you when you know the truth because you then have to produce the evidence and go through the effort of showing them that you know they were lying, why lying was unproductive. Then you have to add how mad you are about having to go these extra laps because you knew they were lying the whole time. A customer service example demonstrates this. Say you ordered 5 shirts from a retailer and 2 of them were the wrong size. When you call and explain the error, the rep assures you that they filled out the order according to your request, based on the paperwork. This doesn't necessarily feel like they're lying, but you still know it's incorrect. After all, you know what you ordered. In this case, you can do some of the work to calibrate, but not all of it. You might be able to pull up your order online, but you can't get a look at their paperwork telling them what to put in the box. No way to prove who made the error just creates a rift unless somebody concedes. Maybe somehow the order was input systemically, freeing all humans from blame, and nobody needs to be accountable. But does that solve your problem as a customer? Does it make you want to keep shopping with them? The alternative is they can provide stellar service by sending you 2 more shirts of the size you actually wanted. Except ideally, the agent you're speaking to does a little research, figures out what went wrong, and tells you specifically what happened and how they're going to fix it. No calibration needed there. A mistake was made and the appropriate person took accountability. We're rarely mad in those instances. I don't know anybody that would be furious with a company that took full blame for an error and worked hard to make it right. Certainly there are exceptions when the error being made is extremely costly, usually in a time-based scenario like, I needed those shirts to give for Christmas, which is tomorrow. But generally we accept that mistakes happen and just want to feel validated and, if possible, made whole, or better. We can appreciate that the company wants to be better, and we might even feel good about having helped them in some small way. Framing accountability in this way allows for growth, but there are situations when you did everything you could in the best way you knew how and something still went wrong. This is where the until it's not part comes in. If you've done the work to understand how everything went and explored how you could have done better and all the evidence continues to point to another person, you are now in the position to have to rely on their sense of accountability. Operating from the mindset of always reviewing to see how you could have done better lends itself to moral authority. And if you have to confront somebody else to ask them to be accountable, you should now be in a just place to do so. That said, there's still a technique I recommend employing when in this position. Questions, crafted well and from a place of caring, are the tool of choice when helping others understand ideas, especially about themselves. They even allow you to continue searching for the possibility that you had some part to play, as you can ask them if they can think of anything else you could have done to help avoid the situation. In a position of leadership, my interest was never that they apologize. It was instead to inspire them to explore the situation and identify where along the path they could have diverged and avoided the mistake. That lesson for them is more valuable than any apology or any fake reputation management could provide. Knowledge is potential power, and information is only as good as the person utilizing it. So the least I can do, we can all do, is allow for the person to gain the knowledge. The principle. Fully own your part to play in any endeavor, action, or interaction. You can only benefit from exploring how you can improve. Want to see how cutting down on the work you cause others can benefit you and maybe the world at large? Watch this video on not putting others to work. Thanks for watching the video and be sure to subscribe for more like it. Click on the notification bell to be alerted to new videos.